Okay, hi Andreas. Thank you for your submission. So obviously it was question for AQA Language Paper 1. The question was about Dick's anger towards Mary. And effectively in this evaluation there were two things you needed to look at: whether his anger towards Mary was really unfair and whether clearly Mary was totally powerless in the relationship. Those were the two things. Now, for evaluation, what you need to make sure you're doing is you're trying to connect multiple pieces of data effectively. And by data, obviously, I mean language and structure. And I think overall you did a pretty good job of that. I did have a read of this ahead of making this video, as you can obviously see. I wouldn't do a statement at the beginning like I would say that I partially agree with the student statement. There's a couple reasons for this. One is because you should lead up to your conclusions. The second thing is because this isn't complete anyway. At the end, you do a fantastic job of actually putting how, in conclusion, you mostly agree with the statement, and then you split it up into those two questions that you're ultimately answering. You seem to think that Dick's anger is pretty much totally unfair, and Mary is mostly powerless, but not completely powerless. So that is really good, having an ending like that. But having this just one line at the beginning is not very useful. So let's read. Firstly, I agree because it does seem as if Dick's furiousness is quite unjustified. Small thing, just a little spelling mistake. We can, at the very beginning of their discourse, see the roots of their sharp conflict. Really nice phrasing. This is especially true when we take a glance at the structural techniques employed by the writer. So that's really good that you're telling the examiner that you're going to be particularly looking at structure. But just remember that the best answers, the ones that are going to get 20 out of 20 here, have an interrelationship between language and structure. For example, the way in which Dick asks for, again, just no need for the apostrophe there, the purpose of which Mary is using water showcases his brutality brimming. The use of the dialogue, what are you using it for, creates quite a cold and harsh tone. That's great. You then obviously need to go into why, and I think you do. The simple sentence used provides very little reasoning, and the presentability of the question, it seems, has been used to illustrate Dick's control. Rather, instead of a cooperative marriage, he is instead the beholder of power. That's a little bit of an archaic word choice, beholder. Good word choice, but I'm not sure if this is exactly right for what you're trying to say. Instead, with the quite succinct nature of his questioning, he beholds authority. So again, a repetition of that word. I think that this is a little unnecessarily wordy. I think you could just say that the harshness of, it's actually an interrogative phrase as well. Interrogative because it's kind of a demanding question. Does ultimately show the harsh tone, as you say, and you could just keep it a bit more concise. Just say that this shows that Dick seems to be trying to keep control over Mary. And maybe that shows that his anger is unfair because it's about control rather than what she actually did. You then go into how this does seem unfair, which is great. You're relating back to agreeing or disagreeing with the student comment. In relation to the student statement, it is unfair as to the reader. It seems Dick is treating her like a subject rather than a wife. Again, as she answers, yet narrated with another simple sentence to convey coldness, we are presented with a simile descriptive of Dick's reaction. So I think that this bit you could just get into that second quote more quickly. One of my major comments for you, really, Andreas, is that you don't need quite as much wordiness a lot of the time. Just make it a bit more structured. Here's my point. I'm going to be looking at Dick's anger in this paragraph. Here are my evidences. Here's my analysis, and combining those evidences to say why I agree or disagree with the statement. So his face darkened and he looked at her in incredulous horror as if she had committed a crime. I said that you could maybe split this into two because you really don't want your quotes to be more than 10 words. 10 words is typically my cutoff. The maximum you can do is 15. And I just feel like this one, because it's two things that you talk about his darkened face and the connotations of that, and the simile, I would split it in two and analyze each part piece by piece. The use of this simile portrays two metaphorical views of Mary. One, that she has no fundamental rights and necessities such as water, just like criminals have no right to freedom. That was a really perceptive moment. I'd love to see more of that coming through Andreas. And two, that her acts lay in a sort of taboo nature like that of a crime. Dick here is thus presented as judgmental, and henceforth we, the reader, become sympathetic with the student's view. Yet, with the use of the adjective darkness to describe his face, his anger seems unjustified, as she answers, clearly conveyed with the use of the simple sentence. Again, you probably don't need this bit, you've already talked about it earlier. Yet he seems to be dramatic and unreasonable. Try not to use plus signs in an academic essay. Again, I'm sympathetic with the student's view due to the nature in which Dick's anger is portrayed. At first, it is said that he tries to keep it calm. This would paint the student's view as erroneous, as instead Dick wouldn't be angry, yet he fails. His dialogue is expressed angrily in a voice he had never used before to her. So you add 3 quotes here at the end and you don't really unpack any of them. You need to unpack those quotes, and that would really, really help boost. To be honest with you, this is probably about 400 words, and I think that this would be better split up into 2 more distinct paragraphs. You've got what are you using it for? Then you've got his face darkened, as if she'd committed a crime, tries to keep it calm, in a voice he'd never used before, and angrily. You've got 6 quotes in there, and you unpack about half of them. So make sure you're unpacking all of them, and I would say that's a structural issue more than anything. I think that you could easily unpack those if you just spent a bit more time on them. To express this point further, between lines 38 and 41, we're brought a boisterous, self-centered view of Dick, with the repeated use of personal pronouns in these lines, like me in the repeated dialogue and I. It seems Mary has no control, and the balance of power in the marriage favours Dick, especially as the control of money is shown to be in Dick's hands, as he orders the water to be fetched. This, in the reader's view, is no marriage. Theoretically, money should be shared, not just in control by Dick. Yet the reason for my partial agreement is because the text demonstrates how she does have partial control, and that there is a partial sympathy for Dick, or from Dick. Despite being out of the rhythm in relation to the seasons and in comparison to Dick, which can be inferred, it seems she has a greater bank of knowledge about her surroundings than Dick. So the issue with this so far, and frankly for the whole paragraph, is that in this first paragraph, you do relate all of your ideas quite solidly in quotations and then unpacking them. And you don't do a perfect job, but you do a good job. In this bit here, unfortunately, it's quite a while until we see any level of to be honest, there isn't really any major analysis. You talk about out of rhythm, but you don't go into the connotations of that. You talk about money, but you don't really go deeply into that either. There's just not really any analysis yet in this paragraph. You then talk about and don't use an ampersand again, like a plus sign, don't use that. When asked about rainfall, Dick seems surprised at her questions, it being narrated, surely she knew when the rain was likely to fall. She had been in the country longer than he had. The use of the word surely is quite symbolic, that Mary could never not know the answers to questions surrounding the environment bespoke to her. So again, the phrasing of this is a little bit awkward, but what you're ultimately saying is that Mary knows the location better than Dick does, and so that does give her a level of power. And maybe that could relate also to it being a bit unfair that Dick is so angry towards her for using water, since maybe she understands rain cycles and water more than he does. Again, the use of the word "oh" is quite emotive. There is an individual assumption in the marriage that knowledge favours Mary, which could be said to be enough to tip the self-centred dialogue and expression of Dick back in balance. Yet just at the end, as she forgives him, again the question about power comes back into question. She is the one doing the acceptance. He apologises, which is declarative. Rather, she could be seen to be, by the reader, rather subservient. Alas, the power balance is not clear, or the balance of power is not clear. So this whole paragraph really needs redrafting. We need to get to more clearly at the beginning. We might say that since Mary has more knowledge of the land, she seems to have a bit more power. Also, the fact that she is the one that chooses to accept his apology, that also suggests she has a bit more power, and maybe it isn't clear. So to me, it seems more like you're disagreeing with the statement in this paragraph, but The quotes aren't well unpacked in this one. You do a better job in this second half. The first half, there's almost no unpacking of or analysis of anything. And then your conclusion is really good. In conclusion, I mostly agree with the statement. Dick's anger is unnecessary or not needed, especially as he apologizes at the end, which I believe shows unfairness. However, nothing about the views explored in the statement can be said to be clear, as the power within the relationship is, whilst not just in Dick's favour, as she holds a bank of knowledge about her area, quite unclear. So this second bit, you could just make it a bit more, a theme of this whole response is a little bit less wordy. You can just say that the power within the relationship is unclear. Some things seem to be in Dick's favour, some things seem to be in Mary's favour. So to sum it all up, 731 words total, which is a great quantity for this question. Always aim for 600 to 1,000 words within the roughly 30 minutes that you have for question 4. I've rewarded it a 14 out of 20, so it's a good answer. I think that the first paragraph is much stronger than the second paragraph. The second half of the second paragraph is stronger than the first half of the first paragraph of the second paragraph. Judicious use of quotes throughout your response, mostly well analysed and explored, both in terms of language and structure. Good range of techniques explored. Great concluding paragraph, which summarises your overall view versus the statement. Try to get more structure in. Try to start each paragraph with a very clear point as to which portion of the question you're addressing. And to be honest with you, this is probably more like 4 paragraphs than 2 plus an intro and conclusion. To be truly perceptive, you might go into any reasons why Dick would be so angry over something so small. So, for example, he does talk about, he trying to keep calm and yet he can't. So that seems unusual. Like if you try to control yourself and can't, it does seem like maybe there is some reason in his mind why he does this. And that might then argue why Dick's anger might be partially justified. You could at least play around with that, and that's going to really help your answer. At times, your written expression is a little awkward, such as never not know, bespoke, beholder of power. So just work on your written expression a little bit as well. But yeah, overall, very good. Well done. And thanks for the submission.